us having a mystery school day, so let's go ahead and drop into it and see what we get. Good day to ya. We welcome you to the realms of light, where the vast majority of who you are also exists. We welcome you to these realms of light from where your physical life, your physical personality, and your entire physical world also springs. We welcome you to another transmission whereby we will facilitate the harmonization and the connection between your physical minds, which you are used to thinking of yourselves as being the physical mind, and your higher minds, which has in large part been in the background as you experience yourselves to be in your current frame, your current culture. But you are recognizing that there are other and vaster portions of the self, and now is the timing in the Sage of Awakening where you will facilitate even greater and greater connections to this higher mind, which up to this point, culturally speaking, has been a bit of a mystery and has been relegated outside, somewhere outside of you, because your definition of self has been thusly quite limited to that which you perceive through the five senses, to that which you cognize through your logical mind, your physical mind. So we are here helping you expand your self-definition beyond the boundaries and the confines of which you have traditionally labeled as the ego consciousness, and helping you to recognize that you have connections, and very vast connections, and a vast network of selfhood that you are learning to tap into. And thusly we appreciate the discussion leading up just before this session was initiated about simultaneous existence and parallel lives and lives in other existences, because this is the age where you will be making connections and increasing the frequency of such connections to the other parallel time streams that your self is experiencing from other vantage points. Thusly, your self-definitions are vastly expanding in this age of awakening. Now, you can explore this on your own, and as has been discussed, the idea of really tuning into time periods that you might have an affinity to. You might notice different kinds of artistic expressions perhaps, or perhaps being drawn to stories from certain time periods. Perhaps certain characters stand out to you in a way that feels a bit extra dimensional, we will say. They have a kind of presence within them that lets you know that there is an energy link, a connection that is being expressed through your attraction to that particular character or that particular story or that particular time period. So we want you to begin to pay attention to these as these are woven into your life. Therefore, the threads of consciousness are ever present in your life through a variety of symbols and metaphors. They are woven into the tapestry of your day-to-day experience. Now, you have thusly trained yourselves as physical minds, as the so-called ego consciousness, to really focus very exclusively on a very narrow band of frequencies that you define as physical reality, that which comes to you through your five physical senses and your logical mind. So you are following this thread of consciousness that you experience as a continuity from day to day, moment to moment, as you would frames in a film strip. So you call this your reality, and everything outside of that seems to be non-existent or irrelevant to you because you have defined it as irrelevant. However, we are letting you know that into and through even this perception of yourself as a physical being are woven many strands of consciousness. And you can learn to follow those other threads of consciousness, even in your day-to-day life, as we have described, by paying very close attention to the variety of symbols that weave themselves through your life. It is as if you have a pattern, a mosaic in front of you that is your life, and you have learned to only see one pattern, but this pattern is interwoven with many, many, many other patterns. And you can gain a kind of, we'll call it a depth perception, whereby instead of perceiving just this one thin layer of reality, you can gain a kind of depth perception where you begin to expand and see that there are other patterns woven into your current pattern of life, and thusly you will start to perceive even the objects that you surround yourself with, the physical objects that you see as the regular objects you interact with on a day-to-day level. You will find that they will take on a kind of depth. The same kind of depth that the dream objects that you experience in your nighttime take on, because you know that your dreams can be multi-layered and multi-dimensional, and you can extract many, many layers of meanings from one dream encounter. Similarly, your physical lives are also dreams that the soul is having. A very highly densified, crystallized dream. But within this dream, you can begin to interpret it too as being also metaphorical, being also symbolic. So each object within your physical life dream can also be interpreted in a variety of ways. And this is the depth perception that we speak of, whereby you can really begin to see that each object can be used as a point or portal through which you can learn to traverse your consciousness along these other threads of consciousness, because that object not only relates to your current physical life, but it also can relate in a variety of ways to the other lives that you're experiencing in simultaneous reality from a higher vantage point, from the soul level, the oversoul level, and so on. So we invite you to look at your lives more and more in the same way that you would interpret a dream reality, because your lives will continually become more and more malleable, flexible, and revelatory. You will gain the ability to reveal these other stands of consciousness as you look at your life more and more and interpret it like a dream. And thusly, having gained this kind of consciousness, you will, as we have been saying, gain that depth perception, whereby you will see that it is as if you have a picture and you have one exposure, but then you'll realize that also there are many, many exposures overlaid within it, and you can follow any thread of consciousness other than the official one to lead you to understand the other parallel and simultaneous lives that are being played out at the same time, so to speak, because everything is simultaneous. So, in the manner of speaking, you have tapped into the nature of this transmission on simultaneity by the very conversation that you had just at the very onset, just before we began the session. So that is all part of the synchronicity. So now we will wish then, having spoken about simultaneous time and simultaneous existences, to open it up for questions, because we are very much aware and trusting that questions themselves will lend themselves to highlight this particular topic in new and exciting ways. So we invite any questions you might have for us at this time.
You were saying how we surround ourselves with things that we know or love or experienced. So when you get that feeling or whatever, how do you manifest it or maybe keep it going? I know it just kind of, because I know what you're saying, because I think I've felt that before. But it's kind of like deja vu-ish.
Yes.
Yeah, and you kind of like keep it going and you kind of know that, I had a question and I forgot, I'm sorry.
Well, that's fine. We can play with this a little bit. The idea is when you have a creative spark, an intuition, You can anchor it into your reality perhaps by writing it down, jotting it down. Sometimes it is very helpful to keep journals and to write these items down even as you might write down your dreams, which is often encouraged in your spiritual and dream exploratory circles. Likewise, you can keep a kind of daydream journal, shall we say, whereby if you experience a particular kind of unique connection, you can jot it down. And this is one way of anchoring it to your physical reality. But also, you can use this sense that you feel when you have that spark of inspiration or intuition or insight. You can learn the frequency itself, make note of the frequency, how it feels in your body. And anytime that you remember that, you are also reconnecting to that particular neurological pattern and energy frequency, which acts as a gateway to facilitate more of these kinds of connections. And this is, in a manner of speaking, another version of jotting it down. You are highlighting it, noticing it, making a point of it, remembering what it feels like in your body, where you feel it in your body, how it resonates in your body, and you're thusly anchoring it into your physicality by highlighting it as important. Now, the idea of dream journals, of course, is that as you begin to write down your dreams, you're training your conscious mind to recognize the value of dreams. Likewise, with these basic, very, very basic exercises, you are training your physical mind to recognize these instances as important. Because if you write something down, your physical mind will say, well, this must be important. If you pause when you have this kind of experience and you begin to investigate it, how it feels in your body, you make note of it, you're again communicating to your physical mind, this is important. And thusly you will punctuate your day with more and more of these instances because you are highlighting them as important, and you will create a kind of momentum. Now, you can also, when you've experienced such a thing or you have a memory of such a thing, take 5 minutes and get very quiet and contemplate, follow the thread, use your imagination to play with the energy, as it were, and see if you can extrapolate upon it. Now, you can play with it in your imagination without feeling like you are searching for something. Rather, use it as a creative production and expand on it in your mind and see if you can create some kind of fun story out of it, or fun play. Keep it very playful. Don't let it be a do or die situation, but play with it. Maybe create a story out of it or create some kind of fanciful idea. So don't put too much stress upon it. Just be playful, like a child would be playful. And children do this very, very easily. Now you have, as adults, been trained out of this ability to play with your imagination. But this is exactly the gateway that will help you to rekindle your awareness of these neurological patterns that will naturally put you in resonance and in lockstep with these other parallel simultaneous existences. So does that help?
Yes. Yes.
Very good, then.
Yeah.
Other questions or clarifications?
Do you mind if I ask you about the ego?
Sure, go ahead.
Could you expand on the ego? I find the ego thing very interesting. Ego, there's a term, but overcoming it. Ego buster or something, you know what I mean?
And this is one of the main reasons why we tend not to use this particular word. However, we use this word in synchronicity because this is a very important conversation. And it brings to the surface exactly the ideas that you've stated, this idea of overcoming, this idea of getting yourself out of the ego. Now, the idea is you want to work with your ego. Because when you push away any portion of your personality, you are creating divisions within the self. And when you create divisions, you are, of course, operating on a negative frequency, because to divide is a negating frequency. And that actually drops you And this is why fighting the ego never really gets you there, because you're expending negative energy to attempt to get to a positive state, and it simply just does not work that way. It is physics. You cannot get to a positive integrative state by dividing yourself or dividing the self. Thusly, as another channel once said, love the ego. And we know that might sound somewhat challenging. And not challenging because it is a challenge itself, but because the nature of how many of you have been trained is to fight with yourselves and to fight with portions of yourself and to create strife and struggle within yourself. And many of you consider this to be normal because your parents did it and your grandparents did it and the ancestors did it, and it's been done for thousands of years. So everyone thinks it's normal, but it is actually quite insane. And from other states of consciousness, even quite humorous. Now, we laugh with you, not at you, of course, because consciousness itself does have a wonderful sense of humor. But what we invite you to do is consider loving all portions of yourself. And yes, even those portions that act out, and we mean especially those portions that you think are acting out, because portions of the self will act out precisely when you cut yourself off from them or attempt to cut them off and isolate them out, or to go beyond them, so to speak, in a manner that shoves them aside. So you want to love yourself and every portion of yourself, including the poor little ego. Now, the physical mind has been put upon it, a lot has been put upon it, a lot of stress, a lot of tension arises within the so-called ego self precisely because your culture, on the one hand, glorifies the ego, but on the other hand, bashes the ego. And so you create this kind of almost like a split personality whereby you glorify the thing, and then when it takes on a glorified role, you hate it, and it hates itself because it is not designed for the role with which it has been trained into in your culture. And so you create all kinds of negative, conflicting self-definitions. So the idea being that the poor little ego is not designed to orchestrate your life for you, and yet you are taught that you must figure everything out with the physical mind, that you must plan your future and consider every contingency, and thusly you go into states of worry because you are attempting to orchestrate the reality, and yet the poor little ego knows deep down that it is not designed for such a task. That is the task of the higher mind. And the higher mind knows the big picture. It is the one standing on the mountaintop and can clearly see all the varieties of choices and parallel realities available, and is constantly beaming this information to you. But because the poor little ego has been trained that it has to go at it alone, that it is alone in the valley of shadow, shall we say, to use a colloquial term, it feels very threatened and on edge and very stressed because it cannot see around the other corner. It feels it must plan for every contingency, and yet it does not see. It is blind because it is only able to see the current frame that you are experiencing. Whereas the higher mind sees all the frames simultaneously and can guide the poor little ego. So the idea is to relinquish control, but not in a way that surrenders it to some nebulous force of the universe. It is actually surrendering control to other portions of yourself, which truly do have your best interest at heart. And so that is the idea. Now, as you're expanding beyond the ego, as we began this transmission, we talked about opening up to the other strands of consciousness. This will help expand the poor little ego beyond its parameters, and you will begin to recognize a kind of multi-dimensional self. And you will also, by extension, also expand into the higher mind, which is necessary to expand into in order to contain this awareness of multi-personhood of which we speak. So that is the idea, is to allow yourself to, from the so-called ego perspective, to recognize you do have a higher mind, to open up to that, and to receive guidance from the higher mind, and let the ego integrate that and let it begin to trust the guidance that comes from these higher portions of the self, which are designed to see your life in totality, whereas your ego is designed to see moment to moment, to give a clear picture of what is happening in this moment. It is not predictive in any nature. It is not designed to orchestrate reality, because as it attempts to orchestrate reality, it ends up banging things or attempting to bang things into place, which creates a lot of stress and tension, not only for yourself, but for your loved ones, because nobody appreciates being controlled from the physical mind level. Not the least you don't appreciate, but also your significant others and your loved ones will also not appreciate being attempted to be controlled by your physical mind, because you do have a saying on your world that the physical mind makes a beautiful servant but a terrible master. And so you are learning to surrender control, but to trust the control that exists at other levels and other portions of the self. So this will be our little piece about this. So does that help or clarify the situation? Or is there anything else we can expand upon?
That was perfect. Thank you.
I have some questions about the ego.
Very good.
I do understand that as a multidimensional being, the ego is just part of my makeup. And sometimes my ego wants to stop me from exploring other realms that aren't physical. Lately, I have been having a conversation with my ego, explaining to my ego that it will make my ego more and not less. Could you tell me what exactly is the ego and its purpose and limitations?
Very good. Of course, in your world, there are many definitions for ego. So we will begin by saying this is our definition, and it may or may not match the definitions you are used to. So it's good to begin with definitions. So this is a very good question. So we will define the ego as that portion of you that is physically focused, that is there to help you to ascertain the current moment event of your life as perceived through the five senses. Now, also included into this, and we will use the term ego simultaneously with the personality self or the physical mind. We use these terms interchangeably. And as to some degree you know that the foundation of the physical mind is the belief structures that you buy into. Now, some of these belief structures are part of your theme of exploration. Let's say as a soul you insert yourself in a certain time-space reality coordinate where certain beliefs are dominant, so that you take on those beliefs so that you later have the experience of extricating yourself from them or transforming the darkness into light. And so belief structures are the core. Now, the beliefs, as you know from your research and your experience in a variety of materials, spiritual teachings, channeled materials, your beliefs generate emotion. So as you define your reality, so too will your emotions follow that definition. If you give a neutral definition, you will tend to have a fairly neutral, balanced emotional response. If you give a negative definition, you will generate negative emotion. And if you give a positive definition, you will generate, generally speaking, positive emotions. So emotions are part of this makeup and give a lot of propelling force to the beliefs themselves. The beliefs are a bit like the blueprint, and the emotions are like the color that fills it all in. And then you have your regular day-to-day thoughts, the thoughts that are generated by emotionality and your beliefs. Now, the thought stream is the general thought climate, shall we say, of your physical mind. Now, one of the easiest ways to discover your beliefs, as you know, is going to be to follow the emotionality back to the belief. You can also observe your thoughts. This is also another common spiritual exercise, observing your thought streams. But the emotionality is like a live wire that will take you right to the belief if you ask the right question. Of course, what would I have to believe is true to be feeling this particular feeling in this moment, in this time-space reality? So having the curiosity will enable you to turn the mind back on itself and to observe itself and to begin to see what it is made of. Now, most of your egos or physical minds are trained to look outward and to search outward for answers, but also to look constantly outward as to ascertain your environments and whatnot. However, you can train the ego to look inward and begin to investigate its own contents, the contents of its own self. And this is what introspection or spiritual practice is all about. So that is the idea. The personality prism or matrix is made up of beliefs primarily, which generate the emotions and feelings. And that also in turn generates the thought stream. Now this, of course, as a physical creature leads to action. And you act out your beliefs, and that reinforces the belief structures because you act out in accordance to what you believe is true. And thusly you reinforce the belief matrix by acting it out, and then the reflective reality, the physical reality which is reflective, will reflect back to you the energy that you put out. So what you put out is what you get back, in other words. So it becomes a very highly self-reinforcing mechanism. And the only way to break this cycle truly is to become conscious of the beliefs that are operating, and thusly to recognize that you actually have choice as to the nature of beliefs that you choose to buy into. And you are in the age of awakening choosing or moving into a reality whereby it becomes more and more obvious that you have choice, that you need not maintain the beliefs of your parents or your ancestors or your culture, that you can extricate yourself from the various belief matrices because they are choices. They are not foregone conclusions. So that is our idea of the ego as the physical mind structure, which creates the reality experience that you find yourselves within. So does this make sense, or is there a clarification?
No, it makes complete sense to me.
I agree. Thank you.
Very good.
Good question.
Any other ideas or questions or clarifications? Well, we will jump in with this little point, since it does beg the question, having thusly understood the ego, well, how do you go about working with it or changing it or transforming it from darkness to light? So as you may know, the idea is to investigate your beliefs. And of course, this is not a new concept. Those of you who are familiar with the Seth material will of course understand belief work very well. But the idea being to really investigate, what are you believing is true? So when you feel a certain feeling, you can ask yourself, what do I believe is true about this situation, about myself within this situation, to feel this way, to be generating this particular feeling? If you have an action behavior that you have as you like to say in your world, a tendency to continue to play out, but you do not prefer it, you can ask yourself, well, what would I have to believe is true in order to perpetuate this kind of action? What do I have to believe is true about myself in this situation to perpetuate this action? Now, this is truly the power that you have to explore your beliefs. And when you do truly know which beliefs you're operating from, you start to recognize that you have a choice and you don't have to buy into those particular beliefs. Your culture, of course, has a very powerful belief matrix and a variety of belief matrices. And they are very self-perpetuating. So oftentimes especially now in your modern age, you have your media apparatuses, which reinforce all kinds of negative beliefs. So you want to be mindful also to which of these that you plug into. And it is not a matter of being on the right side or the wrong side, because oftentimes both sides are playing out the negative beliefs, simply in different clothing. And the idea is, can you rise above this seeming back and forth, or the polarity, through the trinity point of neutrality, and rise above the fray, as it were, to be considering whether what you are observing is fear-based or love-based. That is one question you can use. Is this coming from a fear-based belief matrix reality? Is it coming from a love-based reality matrix? And that is very easily felt again in your body. Remember, your emotions are always telling you exactly what you're buying into, whether it is of a positive or negative vibration. And you can use that. Of course, we can keep chatting about how you transform negative beliefs because it is our passion to do so. But we want to ask if there are any questions or clarifications. So to recap, we will suggest the process of asking, what would I have to believe is true about myself in this situation to feel this way, act this way, or to be receiving this particular reality reflection? Any one of those points you can use. What would I have to believe is true about myself in this situation to feel this way, act this way, or even think this way, or to be getting this particular reality reflection coming back to me at this time? What belief matrix is operating here, or which belief matrix am I choosing to operate from? Because remember, it is always a choice. Another way to explore beliefs is the flip side, is to ask, what am I afraid would happen if I truly move in the direction of what gives me the greatest joy and passion? Because many of you have, as children, have been trained away from your guidance mechanism and have been trained to act and behave in specific ways to please your parents. Now, many parents are well-meaning, and this is the nature of the collective consciousness of third density. So it is not to put blame upon any particular individual, because everyone has bought into this kind of dense reality matrix. But the idea is you can begin to see that many of you, been trained away from your joy, from your passion, from your creativity, and trained into what often even well-meaning parents thought was proper behavior, because that is what they have been trained to do. So even well-meaningly, many negative beliefs are passed from generation to generation. It is often not even a malicious act, it is simply a misguided act of love, but this truly comes out as an act of disconnecting the child from their true natural self. So this is not to lay blame again on any of the generations, but to understand the reality matrix you all have chosen to experience and to extricate yourselves from. So the responsibility always comes back to the individual, not to lay blame on the ancestors or the generations, but to take responsibility in this moment to begin that awakening process, and thusly passing on to the next generations a much cleaner slate. So that is the idea, to truly investigate, either through your joy, your passion, what am I afraid will happen if I truly go into my true natural self, my true expression, my true love, my true passion, or what I have to believe is true about myself in this situation to be feeling this particular way, acting in this particular way, thinking in this particular way, or receiving this particular reality reflection. And do that detective work. Get very, very curious. And allow yourself give yourself permission to see the darkness. Because paradoxically enough, the more you can see the darkness, the more you can rise above it. And the more you're afraid of the darkness, the more you will unconsciously continue to play it out, because you relegate it to the realm of the unconscious, and that which is unconscious will simply perpetuate itself. So that is the idea. So are there any clarifications at this time?
The fear.
Ah, yes, the fear.
The fear. Tell me about it.
The fear is most of the time generated by an idea, a definition. So you can use the fear as your good friend, letting you know that something is a little bit off. Now, we understand that, of course, there is natural fear. When you are standing on the street and you see a car coming towards you, of course, You have a natural fear response because this object could annihilate your physical form, so you naturally step out of the way, and fear can generate the ability of the body to respond very quickly to get you out of that situation. Now, most of the time, fear is triggered because of a definition. So you have a definition that says, well, if I truly go for what I really want, well, I'll be ostracized, and that will be the end of me. So the fear again comes, and now instead of moving out of the way of this moving car, you're moving out of the way of expressing your true natural self, because you have defined the expression of that as leading to a state of ostracism. And thusly, surely you will be annihilated, because you will be completely left alone, and so forevermore you will be left alone, and thusly you will wither and die. And of course, as a child, this is a very real fear, because you are, as a child, dependent on the adults to take care of you. So ostracism is a very, very powerful fear, and a powerful motivator of children. So the idea is to really get down to see what is the fear. Really look at it squarely. It is your friend. It is a messenger to let you know that you're operating in a negative belief matrix. Now, if it is natural fear, by all means, act on that. Get yourself out of danger, as it were. But if it is a fear because you're defining something as a threat, as a danger, that is not really true, but is rather a conclusion, a definition, an idea, then you want to ask, do you really want to listen to this fear? Does it make sense? And the more consciousness you gain within that process, the easier it will be for you to realize that you do have choices. And so if your motivational mechanism is thusly telling you that going in this particular direction is going to be worse off than staying in this miserable situation that you're familiar with, well, you can investigate that, and you can begin to see, well, even looking at other people in your civilization, you can see, well, many people have left very negative situations and have actually created really wonderful lives for themselves. So why am I afraid of leaving this situation? Why is there so much fear that I will be alone, I will shrivel up and die? Whatever the fear is, most of the times it is fairly irrational, but real to the degree that you continue to buy into it. So make it conscious. And often the consciousness itself will render the fear, well, kind of nonsensical. And you'll start to see through it and start realigning your motivational mechanism. Thusly, seeing others who are expressing their joy or who have left toxic situations and have actually done better for themselves can be also an inspiration to you, to let you know that if they can do it, surely you can do it. So play with the fear, investigate it. Don't be afraid of the fear itself, because that is one of the ways that fear perpetuates itself, by telling you, you better not look. So by all means, look, investigate. That's where your power comes in, is your ability to question your own belief matrices.
We were talking about fear.
Yes.
And fear can be a great motivator. How can we use fear to our advantage?
Very good. And we were also talking about choice. Choice being very, very important, because it is your power of choice that even gives you the ability to investigate the fear itself. And the fear, indeed, is there as a messenger. And the messenger of fear lets you know that you are running your energy through a belief matrix that is very potentially, very likely out of alignment with who you truly are. Now, of course, we spoke of natural fear, the fear of getting you out of actual, real, true danger. But as we have observed your planet, the majority of fear upon your planet is not natural fear. It is very irrational fear. And this is the fear that we speak of, which is being generated by negative belief matrices, because you are choosing, consciously or unconsciously, to run your energy through a negative belief matrix. And it is this power of choice. When you begin to investigate your belief matrices and your motivational mechanisms, you can truly begin to appreciate the power of choice and to bring the choice from the unconscious by understanding all of the energies and definitions in play, belief matrices in play, from the unconscious to the conscious. And it is conscious choice where truly you have immense power as creators. And you are learning to use your energy more creatively, more responsibly. And thusly, you can indeed use fear as the indicator to begin to ask yourself those questions. What am I believing is true about this situation to be generating this fear? And then see, what are you afraid of? Ask the question. And be willing to hear the answer, because if you are afraid of the answer, it will be a challenge to see it, of course, to hear it. So it really requires a kind of willingness to investigate all the nooks and crannies of your consciousness. And we understand that you have been taught in many ways to distrust your true being, your true natural selves. However, we will promise you that the investigation of your own consciousness will lead you to more and more of your true natural self. And the only thing you will discover in the great unknown of your true beingness is more and more of your true natural self. And thusly, as the saying on your world goes, you have nothing to fear but fear itself. Now, fear does create a kind of energy that suggests to you not to look in that direction, to turn away, to gloss it over, to avoid. However, this is exactly the mechanism through which it perpetuates itself, by keeping you from truly investigating yourself. Now you have a cute little story in your world that demonstrates this point. It is known as The Wizard of Oz, and you will recognize the scene at the very end, where the man behind the curtain is generating all kinds of seemingly furious and fearful remarks, but truthfully it is just a little guy behind the curtain. And this is the way your negative beliefs operate. They have all kinds of levers to pull because they tie into your survival mechanism. They tie into your natural fear. And rather than your natural fear that tells you, to use our example again, the car is coming, so you better get out of the way, it is telling you that now if you leave this toxic relationship, for example, that now you will surely die, wither and die. So it is tying it into your survival mechanism. It is making it appear as if leaving this toxic situation will be the end of you, will be your annihilation. Now, if you investigate this and you truly hold it in your heart and you hold it in your consciousness, you will recognize that, to use this example, many people have left relationships of a toxic nature and have actually done very, very well for themselves. They have survived. There are groups and institutions in your society that are of aid and assistance to individuals who are in such situations. So you can find a way through it, as long as you investigate the fear itself. But if you relegate to the unconsciousness this fear of death and annihilation by leaving this particular situation, well then you will always come against this great wall of fear. And the little man behind the curtain will always be pulling one over on you, because you will be afraid to even look behind the curtain itself to see that it is just a tiny little belief, making itself appear very, very big. And the paradox is that that little belief is actually using your energy to puff itself up to make it look so frightening. Now we are using the analogy of leaving the toxic relationship because this can be a metaphor or a situation that can be easily understood, because it is relatively well known in your world that toxic relationships can be such that the enmeshment of the individuals can make it appear as if leaving is impossible. Now, this can also be work relationships and relationships of a variety of natures. It doesn't have to be necessarily a romantic entanglement, shall we say. It can be any situation in your life, and it doesn't have to be overtly toxic either. It can simply be the recognition that you no longer fit into a particular company or a certain fellowship, that a certain work is no longer truly resonant with who you truly are. But we do like to use sometimes very dramatic examples because it can really highlight the point that we are making. But it applies to all situations, and even benign situations. You might have a very comfy situation at work, for example. And we're not speaking of toxicity necessarily, but simply the lack of expression of your true natural self and simply just doing tasks for the money, as you say. But generally not truly expressing yourself as well as you could be. And thusly not offering your gift to the world in the way that you could by being your true natural self. So the spectrum is large. Now, we use the dramatic example to highlight that point, but we do also want to express that the spectrum is very, very wide and large and can apply to any situation. So does that make sense, or is there anything we can add to that?
Makes sense to me.
Makes sense to me.
Very good. So we encourage you to really explore the nature of your own consciousness, to explore the depths of your own beingness, to begin investigating and to continue investigating what is in your conscious mind. Now, sometimes it can appear as if psychology is a very complex subject, and indeed many theories have been created over the years in your culture. But the mechanisms of consciousness are quite simple, in fact. And you can begin as yourself to investigate and ask yourself those penetrating questions that we have outlined. By all means, if you feel that you would like some help, then by all means avail yourself to that help that is available. Because there are many individuals now awakening in your world that are very keyed into helping other members of your civilizations also awaken. So there is much help, and do not be afraid to ask for it and to seek it out and to get the support that you need. Because sometimes asking for help is specifically part of your process of awakening. Because sometimes you have been trained to go at it all alone, and yet you are very social creatures. And in this age of awakening now, there are many individuals now awakening to the gift that they have of helping others through the transformational process. So there is a very powerful thread and web of consciousness now, much support, that even though it might be invisible to you in certain states of consciousness, as you begin to awaken and truly desire this process of awakening, you'll find yourself all of a sudden surrounded by all kinds of individuals who are practicing this particular process of awakening, and you'll discover that you are surrounded by incredible help on all levels of consciousness, your human family, as well as non-physicals and extra-dimensionals that are there and ready and willing to help you as long as you are willing to step forward on this path. So there is much support on many levels, many dimensional levels, including within your own human family. And we use the word family meaning your overall human family. There is much beautiful work now being done upon your planet. So avail yourselves of that if that speaks to you. So we thank you for co-creating this wonderful experience. We will ask one last time if there are any opportunities to clarify anything that has been discussed.
How do we ask for help?
How to ask for help? Well, you simply just ask.
I'm the person everybody asks for help. For me to ask somebody, just for menial things, I just can't.
And this is precisely how some of these negative beliefs operate, by making it seem as if there is something wrong with asking for help, or making it seem as if you don't have the ability to ask for help, or perhaps a definition that if you do ask for help, that there is something wrong with you. This is all part of the smoke and mirrors, the curtain, as it were, hiding the negative beliefs, operating the levers, and making it seem as if it is impossible to change. Now we will point out the obvious fact that you are in this co-creative group, and in a manner of speaking, you are already receiving the help by being here, by being in this co-creative environment, by exposing yourself to these truths, by creating an environment, co-creating an environment of sharing. So you're already receiving the help. So sometimes it is not just the words, but making yourself present and available within groups whereby these frequencies are offered. So by showing up here in a manner of speaking, you are asking for help. But understand that this asking is a co-creative act. It is not an act of weakness. It is not derogatory in any way. It is simply showing up and being present and co-creating the change. So you have already, in a manner of speaking, asked for help by showing up and being here and being a part of this co-creative experience. And thusly we invite you to continue to know this vibration and to look for this vibration and find yourself with individuals that are expressing this vibration. And you will find yourself creating a momentum in your life that will truly begin to powerfully change you from the inside out, because you are simply making yourself available to the help that is always there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
This is indeed what the whole mystery school is about. It's about individuals such as all of you who are gathered here, who are truly seeking a higher state of consciousness, a higher vibration, frequency, and who truly wish to discover how to be more of their true natural selves. You are all helping each other. So help is all around you. Very good then. This transmission shall continue on many levels of consciousness. Some of you may find yourself to have interesting dreams. It will also be initiated and will continue for any of those of you who wish to tune in to the recorded version, because understand that this reality bubble will exist, colloquially speaking, in time-space reality terms, will exist eternally. It is a vibration that you can plug into at any time, simply even by remembering this particular session or listening to it at another time, because it exists, and existence has one quality, which is to exist, and you can tap into this frequency thusly at any time and from any place, because it exists, and it exists within you. Thusly we will express our incredible appreciation for your willingness to be in this time-space reality, to undergo these challenges of forgetting who you are so you can remember who you are from a completely new vantage point. We understand the tremendous loss that can be experienced when you go through the process of forgetting your true natural selves, how alone that can feel when you truly buy into the idea of separation from source. And thusly we have tremendous appreciation for those of you who are willing to explore the darkness so that you can transform it into light. Thusly you are the light beings and the light transformers and the light workers of this world. And we hold you in the most incredibly high regard. So thusly do we ask you to hold yourselves in that high regard with us. For it is truly magical what you are doing, and truly precious. A precious gift you give to the universe to come into such degrees of darkness and then to willingly transform that darkness to light. You are truly courageous souls, and we hold you in the most highest regard, thusly, and ask that you hold yourselves in such high regard. And whatever blessings are ours to give, we give, and we will wish each and every one of you a beautiful and a fond and glorious good day. Very good.